In September of 1856, Colonel Abner Whitfield announced something so unthinkable that even the harshest planters in Central Virginia stepped back in silence. His daughter, Eliza Whitfield, 25 years old, pale-skinned, frail, and publicly labeled unmarriageable after 3 failed courtships, was to be handed over in absolute authority to the strongest enslaved man on Whitfield plantation, a towering, quiet 29-year-old blacksmith named Roman. Witnesses counted 3 documents for signatures and 1 iron key placed directly into Roman's hand. White society was scandalized, but they did not know the real truth. By winter, 6 men would be dead, the Whitfield estate would be sealed, and no one could explain what had happened inside that house. What truly happened between Eliza Whitfield and Roman? What did she demand, and what did he do, that left Virginia trembling for decades? Before we uncover the disturbing truth, subscribe, hit that bell, and comment your state below. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Central Virginia in 1856 carried a beauty so deceptive it bordered on cruel. The late summer heat clung to the earth like a thick velvet cloth, trapping the scent of tilled soil, horse sweat, and the faint sweetness of rotting apples that had fallen too early from overburdened branches. Dragonflies skimmed the marshy edges of the Rivanna River, and cicadas screeched with a feverish insistence that made even the strongest men restless by sundown. Whitfield Plantation sat on a crest overlooking all of it. Nearly 800 acres of tobacco rows, blacksmith forges, barns, and cabins that stretched like ribs across the landscape. Travelers said the land looked prosperous. Locals said it looked haunted. Neither observation was wrong. The Whitfield family had carved their legacy out of these hills long before Virginia became a state, long before the great-grandfathers of the enslaved people laboring here had been born or sold or captured. For more than a century, the Whitfields were known as men of iron. Unforgiving, meticulous, unworried about the blood left behind their decisions. And at the center of the current generation's rule was Colonel Abner Whitfield. The colonel was a man shaped like the land he possessed, broad, stern, weathered. He had inherited the plantation at 24, survived 2 wars, and outlived a wife whose portrait he kept on the mantle solely because removing it would raise questions he did not care to answer. He had no sons, no brothers, and his cousins were as useless to him as the faded portraits of Whitfields who had died without adding anything worth remembering. He had only a daughter. Eliza Whitfield stood on the upstairs balcony that morning, her hands curled around the railing as she looked across the hazy stretch of fields. She was 25, with pale, delicate features and long dark hair braided loosely down her back. Some claimed she was beautiful. Others insisted beauty meant little when a woman's reputation preceded her into every room like a warning bell. And Eliza knew her reputation was spoken in low, pitying tones. Unmarriageable. That word stuck to her like dust, refusing to be brushed away despite her father's attempts, despite the money he had offered, the quiet threats he had made, the land he promised to whichever young gentleman could see past her shortcomings. No one did. Not after the first suitor vanished in the night. Not after the second returned her ring with trembling hands. Not after the third muttered, "She knows," refused to elaborate, and rode off with a face pale as death. Eliza did not speak of any of it. Silence had become her armor. But silence also frightened her father more than anything. Behind her, the door to the balcony opened. The colonel stepped out, boots heavy on the floorboards. "You are pale again," he said. "I am always pale. Do not jest with me." A Whitfield woman must hold herself with strength. She kept her gaze on the horizon. "I have strength." He inhaled sharply, annoyed by what he perceived as defiance. 3 men have turned away from you. 3. Do you understand the disgrace? Do you understand what people whisper? "I hear them," she said softly. "I do not care." But she did care. And the narrator knew it. The words ate at her ribs, pressed against her skull when she tried to sleep. The colonel watched her for a long moment, jaw tight. He did not understand his own daughter and had no desire to. What he wanted was control, over his land, over his fate, and over her. But control had been slipping from his hands like river mud. Profits fell. Workers grew restless. His own aging body failed him in ways he refused to acknowledge. And Eliza, his only heir, was drifting into a future he could neither shape nor predict. Below the balcony, the rhythmic clang of metal striking metal echoed across the fields. The colonel's eyes shifted toward the blacksmith's forge. Even from this distance, the figure inside commanded attention. Roman, the strongest enslaved man on the estate. Broad-shouldered, quiet, disciplined. His presence unsettled overseers, impressed laborers, and irritated the colonel in ways he could not articulate. Roman worked with the focus of a man who had learned young that attention kept him alive. He never spoke unless necessary. He never complained, never asked, never pleaded, not even when punishment would have been justified. Eliza's gaze flicked toward the forge as well. Roman's silhouette moved with an economy of motion that fascinated her. He lifted the glowing iron with thick leather gloves, hammering with such precision that sparks flew in perfect arcs. The colonel followed her line of sight and frowned. "Do not watch him." "Why?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Because it is improper." Eliza said nothing, but the thought formed anyway. Improper compared to what? Compared to being abandoned by 3 suitors? Compared to being whispered about like a ghost? Compared to feeling more alive watching a man work iron than listening to another gentleman recite poetry? The colonel did not see the flicker in her expression. He was too preoccupied with something else, a seed of an idea forming, dark and desperate, fed by humiliation and pride. What he did not know, the narrator would later reveal, was that this morning on the balcony marked the last ordinary moment Whitfield Plantation would ever experience. The wind shifted. The smell of smoke drifted up from the forge. Dragonflies darted. Cicadas droned. And far below them, Roman raised his head, sensing eyes upon him. He looked toward the balcony. Eliza did not look away. Neither did he. It lasted only a second, but it was the beginning of everything that followed. Roman had been sold 6 times before his 15th birthday, but no one on Whitfield Plantation knew the full story. They saw the broad shoulders, the quiet discipline, the scars that crossed his forearms like pale lightning, and they imagined brutality, rebellion, punishment. What they did not imagine were the years before the scars, years of being groomed into silence, shaped by fear, and taught to endure more than any man should. He had been born on a smaller plantation outside Charleston, the only child of a seamstress who rarely spoke above a whisper. His mother's voice was the first thing he remembered, soft as linen, singing to him in the dark when she thought no one listened. She vanished when he was 7. Sold. No warning. No goodbye. After that, Roman learned the value of quiet. Quiet meant survival. By 14, his body had outpaced the boys around him. Overseers took notice. Strength made him useful. Silence made him manageable. A traveling ironworker saw potential in the boy's height and hands and convinced the master to lease him out. Roman's life changed the day he stepped into a forge for the first time. The heat felt familiar. The glow of metal reminded him of the lantern his mother used to hold during storms. And the hammer in his hand felt like something he had always carried deep within him. When the Whitfield estate acquired him at 19, they purchased him not for field work but for ironwork, wagon repair, horseshoe crafting, and the countless unending tasks that kept the plantation running. Roman became indispensable, not by choice but by submission to necessity. Yet the overseers never liked him. "He is too quiet," one muttered. "He listens too much," said another. But what unsettled them most was Roman's resolve. He did not break. Not under exhaustion, not under threat, not under pain. Men with power disliked anything they could not dominate. And Roman was a reminder, silent, towering, ever-present, that there existed strength beyond their reach. That morning, the forge burned hotter than usual. Roman pumped the bellows, sweat sliding down his spine despite the early hour. Sparks crackled around his boots. The iron on the anvil glowed a furious orange, like molten sunrise. He hammered with practiced precision, the rhythmic metallic ring rolling across the fields. A younger enslaved man, Caleb, watched from a few feet away, wiping soot from his brow. "You gone wear that anvil out one day," Caleb said, attempting a smile. Roman dipped the iron into a water barrel. The metal hissed violently. He did not smile, but his voice rumbled low. Iron don't get tired. Maybe not. But men do. Roman didn't answer. His gaze drifted, unbidden, toward the balcony of the main house. The white railings gleamed in the sun. He had felt her eyes even before he lifted his head. Eliza Whitfield did not look at him like other white women did, fearful, disgusted, fascinated in the wrong ways. She looked at him as though she were searching for something. Caleb followed his gaze, then shook his head. Best keep your eyes down, Roman. Roman returned to his work, hammering once more. I know. But he didn't know what was coming. None of them did. Not yet. A sudden creak behind him pulled his attention toward the open doorway of the forge. The overseer, Master Fitch, stepped inside. He was a thin man with a hawk-like face and a habit of tapping his whip against his thigh even when he wasn't angry, like he needed to remind the world it was there. Colonel wants that horseshoe set ready by noon, Fitch said. Roman nodded once. Fitch's eyes narrowed. Mind your place, boy. You answer when spoken to. Roman looked up slowly, deliberately. Yes, sir. Fitch seemed irritated that he felt no fear. Overseers preferred trembling obedience. Roman gave only respectful silence. The overseer stepped closer to Caleb. And you stop gawking. Get to the stables. Caleb hurried away. Fitch lingered another moment, scanning Roman's face. There's too much pride in you. There's no pride, Roman said quietly. Only work. Fitch clicked his tongue, unconvinced. He left with a muttered insult, boots crunching on the dry earth outside. Roman exhaled. The forge fell back into its rhythm. The bellows, the sparks, the heat. Work numbed thought, and Roman welcomed it. But he could not shake the feeling from earlier. The look Miss Eliza had given him. A stillness in her eyes that felt strange, unfamiliar. As though she recognized something in him, something he didn't know how to name. By late morning, the sun was merciless. Thick clouds sat heavy above the treetops, promising a storm before nightfall. Roman stepped outside to cool his face in the breeze. He wiped his arms, flexing the tension from his shoulders. Behind him, two enslaved women whispered near the well. Did you hear? One said. Another suitor gone. Rode off without his hat. Colonel Near cracked the mirror shoutin' this morning. I heard Miss Eliza cried. No, child, the other whispered. She don't cry. She sees things. Roman paused without realizing it. The women noticed and lowered their voices further. Roman walked back into the forge, jaw tight. What he did not know was that these whispers, these glances, these tensions hanging in the air like storm clouds, were the earliest signs of a transformation already in motion. By nightfall, the colonel would stand over a set of documents that would change Roman's fate forever. And by winter, 6 men would lay dead because of what those papers set into motion. Eliza Whitfield walked the halls of the main house like a drifting wraith, present, visible, yet somehow untouchable. Servants whispered that she moved too quietly for a woman raised among polished floors and creaking staircases. Others whispered that she slept too little, spoke too rarely, and stared too long at things no one else noticed. The truth was simpler. Eliza had learned long ago that silence was the only safe place in a house ruled by her father's temper. That afternoon, she sat in the drawing room beneath a tall window, embroidery hoop resting untouched in her lap. The colonel's voice traveled through the hallway, sharp, irritated, impatient. Newspapers rustled. A door slammed. And then another. She did not flinch. She had endured 25 years of that voice. Instead, her mind drifted to the 3 men who had once promised to marry her. The names still lingered like ghosts. Thomas Bellamy, the charming son of a Richmond merchant. He had courted her for 6 months before the night he knocked over his own chair, grabbed his coat without buttoning it, and fled the plantation like a man chased by wolves. His farewell offered no explanation. His father returned the engagement letter 2 days later, claiming irreconcilable concerns. Nathaniel Carter. Educated, polite, trembling. He lasted a week. The moment she told him she suffered episodes, brief, uncontrollable lapses of vision and sound, he paled and stepped back as though she had struck him. He left her on the porch that night, muttering apologies to no one. Charles Langford. the third suitor, confident and ambitious. He gave her a ring of polished gold and seemed unaffected by gossip. But something changed during their fifth visit. He spent 15 minutes alone in her father's study, emerged with a face as white as bleached linen, and refused to speak another word to Eliza. The next morning he returned the ring with a single line written in a trembling hand. She knows. Eliza had burned the note. But she remembered the look in his eyes, fear, pure and unfiltered. Downstairs the front door opened. Heavy boots stomped across the floor. The colonel barked orders at someone, his voice swelling with indignation. Eliza leaned back in her seat. The window cast a long rectangular shadow across the room, dividing her body neatly in half. It made her feel cut open, exposed. The door to the drawing room opened abruptly. The colonel strode in. "We need to talk," he announced. She lowered her embroidery but did not stand. "What have I done now?" she asked. "Do not test me, Eliza." His jaw twitched. "We are on the brink of disgrace." "We have been on that brink for years," she said lightly. "You simply chose not to notice." His nostrils flared. 3 men, Eliza. 3. And each left with less sense than he arrived. The county is talking. They always talk. This is different. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. "They are calling you defective." Eliza's fingers tightened on the embroidery frame until the wood creaked. "I am not defective." "You are unmarriageable," he snapped. The word landed between them like a stone. Eliza didn't speak for a moment. Her throat tightened, but her voice stayed level. "Is that what you think of me?" "I think of our family name," he said. "And you are destroying it." She swallowed, forcing calm. "Perhaps the men you chose were simply cowards." "I choose nothing," he said. "It is you who drives them away." He stepped closer. His shadow swallowed hers. "I will not let this continue." A strange calm came over her. "What do you intend to do?" He didn't answer. Not directly. Instead he said, "A woman must obey. A woman must be shaped. You resist. Something in you refuses order." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "I refuse cruelty." "Cruelty is necessary," he said. "But rebellion in a daughter is unacceptable." For the first time that day, Eliza looked him in the eyes. Really looked. The colonel's irises, once sharp blue, were clouding at the edges from age. But inside them burned something deeper than anger. Fear. He feared losing control. He feared losing his legacy. He feared the growing whispers about his daughter, whispers he could not silence. The colonel paced across the room, hands clasped behind his back. "There are methods," he murmured as though speaking to himself. "Methods used in Georgia, methods used to correct disobedient women." Eliza stiffened. "You would not dare." His gaze snapped toward her. "I will dare anything to save this family." Before she could respond, a faint metallic ring drifted through the window, the steady hammering from the forge. Roman at work. The colonel's attention shifted. He walked to the window and looked outward, watching the blacksmith's powerful strokes. His jaw clenched, the vein in his temple pulsing. Eliza followed his gaze, though she did not move from her chair. Roman appeared as nothing more than a silhouette from this distance, towering, resolute, tireless. Sparks flared around him like fireflies. His bare forearms glistened with sweat. Every motion was controlled violence channeled into purpose. For a moment, neither father nor daughter spoke. Then the colonel said quietly, "There are men who must be obeyed, and men who must obey." Eliza felt a coldness spread through her chest. "What are you planning, father?" He didn't answer. He only watched Roman. And the narrator knew with grim certainty, that the decision forming in the colonel's mind in that moment would ignite the chain of events that left 6 men dead by winter. But Eliza sensed it too. A shift in the air. A tightening. A storm building in silence. And Roman, still unaware, hammered at the glowing iron, never sensing that his life and hers were about to collide in a way that would change Virginia forever. The evening storm rolled in faster than anyone expected. Thick gray clouds sank low over Whitfield Plantation, dragging the fading daylight into a premature dusk. Thunder rumbled across the hills, low and distant at first, then closer, like something heavy walking through the sky. Inside the main house, Colonel Abner Whitfield paced his study with the restless energy of a man trapped inside a decision he could no longer avoid. His boots thudded against the wooden floorboards, each step echoing through the room's dark paneled walls. Above the fireplace hung portraits of Whitfield men, stern faces, cold eyes, legacies built on dominance. They watched him from the shadows as though demanding he act, demanding he choose. On the desk before him lay 3 documents, each bearing the Whitfield seal. Blurred ink smudges marked where he had gripped his quill too tightly. The top page held a sentence that even he had hesitated to write. Complete authority over Miss Eliza Whitfield for the duration of 90 days. His jaw tightened every time he read it. There were rumors, old and whispered, of certain corrections used on plantations farther south. When daughters resisted, when sons embarrassed the family, when anyone of value refused to bend. The methods varied, but the core principle was always the same. Break the will before the body. A visiting planter from Georgia had mentioned it casually over bourbon weeks earlier. There are ways, the man had said, swirling his drink, to shape a wayward daughter. Ways that do not involve doctors, priests, or forced marriages. He described a practice hidden in the folds of slave law, something that lived in the margins between legality and cruelty. It requires a strong hand, the man had added, the strongest on your estate. That sentence returned to the colonel now, unwelcome and yet irresistible. Thunder cracked sharply overhead. The colonel looked up, startled. His old bones ached in the shifting pressure. He took a breath, steadying himself. "This is necessary," he muttered. "Essential. A Whitfield cannot be pitted." Across the room, the door creaked open. A thin servant slipped inside. Matthew, the quiet steward who had served the family for a decade. "Sir," Matthew said, "Mr. Fitch is waiting in the hall." "Send him in." The overseer entered with stiff shoulders and wary eyes. Fitch always sensed when something dangerous was brewing. It made him fidgety. The colonel gestured toward the papers. "I require a witness." Fitch stepped closer, scanning the first line. Confusion creased his brow. "Sir, this concerns your daughter?" "It concerns my family's future," the colonel snapped. "Do not question what you cannot understand." Fitch swallowed. "And you wish Roman to?" The colonel stared at him with a razor's edge in his gaze. "Roman will do as commanded." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room in an eerie blue-white burst. Fitch flinched. "What if he refuses?" Fitch asked. "He will not. But if he does, then I will remind him of his place." The colonel turned away from Fitch, closing the distance between himself and the window. The storm drenched the land in sheets now. Rain hammered the roof. Wind rattled the shutters. Far beyond the fields, the forge still glowed, its light flickering like a heartbeat in the darkness. Roman had not gone inside when the rain began. He worked through storms as though they were background noise, as though the sky had no authority over him. The colonel watched him with both irritation and fascination. "Look at him," he said quietly. "Do you see another man on this estate with such resolve? Such endurance?" Fitch hesitated. "He frightens the others." "He should. But sir, your daughter?" The colonel's voice cut like a blade. "My daughter is no longer my concern. My legacy is." He reached for the quill. "We finish this tonight." Fitch forced his signature onto the witness line, his hand trembling slightly. Something about the document felt wrong, improper, even for a man accustomed to cruelty. It blurred boundaries he had never thought to question. When Fitch left, Matthew lingered. He was a soft-spoken man, rarely noticed, rarely trusted to speak. But tonight something in him stirred. "Sir," he said timidly, "Miss Eliza, does she know of this arrangement?" The colonel's expression hardened into something monstrous. "She does not need to know." Matthew exhaled slowly. "Sir, with respect, there are laws." The colonel slammed his fist onto the desk. "I am the law here." Matthew closed his mouth. He stepped back and bowed his head. As he slipped out into the hallway, the narrator knew that Matthew would remember this night for the rest of his life. The smell of ink, the crackle of the storm, the look on the colonel's face when he sealed the document. Matthew would recall it years later when recounting the fall of Whitfield Plantation. Upstairs, Eliza sat in her dimly lit room, running her fingertips over the spine of a closed book. She felt the storm in her bones, felt the shift in the house's atmosphere, felt her father's pacing below her like a distant drumbeat. Her heartbeat quickened for reasons she did not understand. She whispered to herself, "Something is coming." Outside, Roman stood beneath the overhang of the forge, rain sliding from his shoulders, steam rising from the anvil. He didn't know why his chest felt tight. He didn't know why the wind felt like it carried a warning. Lightning cracked again. The Whitfield seal dried on the parchment. And somewhere in the shadows of that storm-soaked night, the first thread in the unraveling of the Whitfield family was pulled. The rain eased by dawn, leaving the plantation soaked and steaming. Mist rose from the earth like breath escaping the lungs of the land itself. The sky was pale, almost translucent, still trembling from the previous night's storm. Whitfield Plantation felt unusually quiet, too quiet. Even the birds kept their distance. Roman arrived at the forge before sunrise as he always did. He stoked the coals, pumped the bellows, prepared his tools. But his mind wasn't on the metal. It drifted back to the uneasy tension he felt the night before. The thunder had rung through his bones. The wind had carried something sharp and unsettling. He couldn't name it, but he felt it settling into the roots of the plantation like an uninvited guest. By mid-morning, footsteps approached from behind. Heavy, deliberate. Roman recognized them instantly. Master Fitch. Roman didn't turn. He kept his hammer moving, shaping the red-hot metal with steady strikes. "Roman," Fitch said. Roman dipped the iron into the barrel. The water hissed. "Yes. Colonel wants you in the main house." Roman paused. In 10 years of service on the estate, he had been summoned to the main house only 3 times. Once to repair a stair railing, once to shoe the colonel's prized horse, and once to fix a warped section of the back door. He had never been summoned inside without a specific task. "What for?" Roman asked. Fitch didn't answer immediately. That alone made Roman's stomach tighten. "You will follow?" Fitch said at last. Roman wiped his hands on a cloth and stepped out into the sunlight. Fitch walked ahead, not looking back. Roman followed, silent as always, but alert. Something was wrong. He could feel it with every step toward the house. When they reached the front steps, Fitch turned, blocking the doorway with his arm. "Keep your eyes down. Speak only when spoken to." Roman nodded. They stepped inside. The house smelled of beeswax, old wood, and tobacco. Persian rugs muffled their footsteps. Gas lamps flickered along the hallway despite the daylight. Fitch led him to the colonel's study, then stopped outside the door. "He's inside," Fitch murmured. "Do not anger him." Roman entered. Colonel Whitfield stood behind his desk, shoulders squared, expression unreadable. The storm had aged him overnight. Deep lines cut into his face, and his eyes burned with a wild intensity Roman had never seen. On the desk lay the papers. Beside them, 3 iron keys. And standing at the window, half in shadow, was Eliza Whitfield. Roman's chest tightened. He tried not to look at her, but something in her presence drew him. She was dressed simply, hair loosely tied, hands clasped before her. She didn't look afraid. She looked aware. The colonel gestured sharply. "Step forward." Roman obeyed. Whitfield didn't waste time. "I have drafted a contract," he said. "Binding. Legal. Witnessed." He tapped the parchment with 2 fingers. "This document grants you complete authority over Miss Eliza Whitfield for a period of 90 days. Roman's breath stilled. Eliza shifted slightly, but her face remained calm. The colonel continued. "During this period you will ensure her obedience, her routine, her discipline, her correction." The words hung in the air like smoke. Roman remained silent, but his jaw tensed. "Sir," he said quietly, "I do not understand." "You do not need to understand," Whitfield snapped. "You need only to obey." Roman looked at Eliza at last, truly looked. Her eyes met his with an unsettling steadiness. She wasn't resisting. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't confused. She was waiting. Whitfield grabbed one of the keys from the desk and pressed it into Roman's hand. "This opens the north wing," he said. "Your quarters are relocated there. You will sleep beyond her room. You will enforce structure. You will not leave that area at night." Roman stared at the key. Cold iron. Too light to carry the weight of what it represented. "I am a blacksmith," Roman said slowly. "Not a—" "You are what I require you to be," Whitfield cut in. Roman felt anger coil in his chest. Not rage, just a deep, simmering refusal. "I will not harm her." Whitfield's face twisted. "Harm? No. You will control her. Shape her. She is a Whitfield and she will behave as one." Eliza finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but it reached Roman like a tap on the shoulder. "Roman," she said, "do you fear me?" He turned toward her. "No." "Good." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, an emotion Roman didn't understand. "Then perhaps you are the only one who shouldn't." Whitfield slammed his palm on the desk. "Enough. Sign the document." Roman didn't move. Fitch stepped forward, whip visible on his belt. The colonel's eyes hardened. "You will sign," Whitfield said, "or I will have you whipped until your back is bone." Roman looked at the pen, then at Eliza, then at the key in his hand. This wasn't a choice. It was coercion disguised as command. Quietly he took the pen. The moment his name touched the page, something in the room shifted. Eliza inhaled softly as though bracing herself. Whitfield exhaled in triumph. "It is done," the colonel muttered. Roman placed the pen down. "What you do not know," the narrator would later reveal, "is that 3 men would die because of this signature. And 3 more because of what Eliza did next." Whitfield extended a second key toward his daughter. "You will obey him," the colonel said. She did not take it. Instead, she looked at Roman and said, "When do we begin?" And Roman, holding the cold iron key in his palm, realized that neither of them could step back from this edge. The fall had already begun. The north wing of Whitfield Plantation had always been cold. Even in August heat, even when sunlight flooded the hallway, something about that wing clung to shadow. Eliza had grown up avoiding it. The servants said the original Whitfield patriarch died there, alone in a locked room, speaking nonsense to walls no one else could hear. Children refused to play near its doors. Dogs growled at its threshold. Roman entered it for the first time that evening. Fitch had escorted him through the main hallway, past portraits and dusty candle holders, past the dining room with its polished silver and the faint smell of old wine. The north wing door creaked open like a warning. The corridor beyond stretched long and dim, lit by only 2 lamps. "This is your place now," Fitch muttered. "You keep to this wing. You keep her in line." Roman didn't answer. Fitch's voice lowered. "And Roman, do not forget that the colonel is watching." With that, he left, closing the heavy door behind him. Roman stood alone in the corridor, holding the iron key. The silence pressed in around him. The floorboards groaned with each tentative step. A thin draft wandered through the hallway, brushing against his skin like fingers that didn't belong there. He found the small room assigned to him. Not a cabin. Not a shack. A room inside the house. 4 walls, a narrow bed, a small table, a single oil lamp. The window pane rattled softly from wind. He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees. He had never slept under a white family's roof before. He had never been given keys. Keys were symbols of authority, of ownership. And the idea that he now possessed a key to a section of this house felt wrong, dangerous. He turned it over in his palm. The metal was smooth, cold, trustless. Outside his door, footsteps approached. Light, barefoot. Eliza. Roman rose instinctively as she appeared in the doorway, her white nightgown brushing the floor, lantern held low. She was pale as always, but her eyes were dark in the lantern's glow, darker than he had seen before. "Your room is here?" she asked quietly. "Yes." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. The lantern's glow danced across the walls. "Do you find it strange?" she asked. Roman didn't respond. He wasn't sure he was allowed to. Eliza stood near the bed, fingertips grazing the wooden headboard. "My father thinks this wing corrects people," she said, "that the cold does something to the mind." She lifted her eyes to him. "Does it frighten you?" Roman met her gaze. "Cold is not what frightens me." "What does?" He hesitated. "A trap I cannot escape." Something like sadness passed across her face. "Then we are both trapped." She turned, walking back toward the door, the lantern flickering behind her. "Good night, Roman," she said. He didn't answer until she was already stepping into the hallway. "Good night, Miss Eliza." She paused. "You may call me Eliza." He said nothing. She disappeared into the shadows. When her footsteps faded, Roman closed his door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. The room felt smaller than before. The silence heavier. He did not sleep. Eliza's room lay only 2 doors down. Later that night, Roman heard movement, soft pacing, the rustle of fabric, a muffled cry. He stood, listening through the wall, uncertain whether to intervene. The contract said he held authority over her, but he did not understand what that meant. Nor did he want to. A sudden thump jolted him. Eliza gasped sharply. Roman stepped into the hallway. The corridor was dark, save for her lantern glowing faintly behind her door. He approached, knocked once. "Eliza." Silence. "Eliza, are you well?" A moment passed before her voice drifted through the door, strained, breathless. "Do not come in." Roman hesitated. Something in her tone was wrong. Unsteady. "I do not need help," she said, but her voice trembled. Roman took a step back. "If you are in danger—" "No," she replied sharply. "Not danger. Just leave me." He obeyed. He had no right to do otherwise. Yet as he stood in the corridor, he realized something unsettling. Her breathing changed every night. Shallow then frantic. Silent then gasping. As though she fought invisible battles. What he did not know, not yet, was that Eliza Whitfield suffered episodes she had hidden her entire life. Episodes her father believed could be corrected. Episodes that terrified her just enough to make her welcome Roman's presence, even when she didn't admit it aloud. Over the next days, everything shifted. The north wing became a world of its own. Roman lit the lamps before dusk, checked the doors, walked the corridor in disciplined silence. Eliza emerged at strange hours, sometimes barefoot, sometimes with books pressed to her chest, sometimes simply standing in the hallway as though she were listening for something only she could hear. Once she asked him, "Do you believe people can sense storms before they come?" Roman answered truthfully, "I believe some storms begin inside." Her look lingered on him longer than necessary. Meanwhile, the rest of the house grew uneasy. Servants avoided the north wing entirely. A maid swore she heard voices at midnight, Roman's deep tone and Eliza's soft one blending in a way she didn't like. Fitch avoided Roman outright, muttering that no good came from giving a slave keys. And the colonel, though he pretended authority, was visibly unsettled by the new arrangement. He checked the north wing twice a day, ensuring doors were locked, routines followed, obedience maintained. His cane tapped sharply on the floorboards, announcing his presence long before he arrived. On the 4th evening, as Roman escorted Eliza to her room after she drifted too far down the corridor, she asked a question that tightened the air around them. "Do you think," she said softly, "that my father gave me to you because he hates me?" Roman stopped walking. "I do not know his mind. But you know what men do to things they hate." He turned toward her, voice low. "I will not harm you." "I know," she whispered. And for the first time, Roman believed that she truly did. What he did not know, what neither of them knew, was that someone else listened that night. Someone who would soon decide the arrangement had gone too far. And that someone's decision would draw blood before the month ended. Eliza had never been good at hiding the truth from people who truly looked at her. Most never did. Most glanced at her the way one glances at a pale birch tree, pretty in passing, unimportant up close, and too odd to examine without feeling unsettled. But Roman looked. Not with pity, not with judgment, not with fear. He simply saw. And that terrified her more than she expected. The 7th night in the north wing began with rain. Not the violent kind that shook windows, but a soft, persistent drizzle that whispered against the shingles. The house settled into its strange nighttime stillness. Servants retired early. The colonel locked himself in his study. Fitch patrolled the grounds with a lantern, muttering curses at the mud. Roman lit the lamps in the corridor and checked the doors as he always did. But tonight, when he reached Eliza's door, he found it already open. She stood inside, facing the window, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. The lantern on her bedside table flickered weakly, casting long shadows along the walls. "Eliza," Roman said. "Come in," she whispered. Roman stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't know why she had summoned him, only that the atmosphere felt different tonight. Tighter. More fragile. She didn't turn. "Do you hear it?" she asked. Roman listened. "The rain?" "No," she lifted her chin slightly. "The rest of it." Roman waited, letting the silence breathe around them. Then he heard it, a faint, irregular tapping. Not rain. Not footsteps. Something between. "It's been happening for years," she said softly. "Sometimes in the walls. Sometimes under the floorboards. Sometimes behind my eyes." He frowned. "Behind your eyes?" She turned to him then, finally revealing her face in the lantern light. Her expression wasn't fearful. It was exhausted. "I told my suitors," she said. "I told them about the episodes. I told them that sometimes everything goes quiet in my mind, until suddenly it's too loud. I told them I see things when I'm tired. Shapes in doorways. Shadows that don't move like they should." Roman remained still. He didn't speak. He did not recoil. Eliza noticed. It steadied her. "They didn't listen," she continued. "Or they listened too much. They thought I was broken. Dangerous. Unfit for marriage." Roman's voice came low. "You are not broken." "Then what am I?" she asked. He looked at her calmly. "Human." Her breath hitched. It was such a simple word, delivered without shame. But it pierced something inside her. "What do you see, Roman?" she asked. "When you look at me?" He hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because he had never been allowed to say what he truly thought. His whole life had been built on silence. "I see someone trying to survive," he said quietly, "and someone who has been alone too long." Her throat tightened. She turned away, staring again at the rain-streaked window. "My father thinks I'm defiant," she murmured. "But I'm scared, Roman. I've been scared since I was a child. He never understood it. He punished it. He punished everything he didn't understand." Roman stepped closer, not touching her, but near enough that she felt the warmth radiating from him. "What did he do?" he asked. She closed her eyes. "When I was 11, I told him the shadows in the hall moved differently at night. He locked me in the room alone until morning. When I was 16, I told him voices whispered from the north wing. He called a doctor who bled me with leeches." Roman's jaw set tightly. "When the first suitor left," she continued, "my father beat the servant who escorted him out. When the second left, he broke a chair. When the third left, he broke a mirror. And when they all left?" Roman asked. "He broke me," she whispered. A long silence fell between them. Only the rain filled it. Roman spoke first. "You told me once I could call you Eliza." She nodded faintly. "Then you should know this," he said. "I do not obey cruelty. Not from him. Not from anyone." She finally looked at him fully. "The contract binds you. I do not belong to the paper he signed." Her breath trembled. "But he thinks he owns you." "He thinks many things," Roman said. "Men like him always do." Their eyes held. In that quiet, rain-filled room, something unspoken passed between them. Something dangerous, something forbidden, something the colonel had never anticipated when he forced their fates together. The candle flame fluttered. A draft curled around their ankles. Somewhere in the corridor, a floorboard creaked. Eliza stepped back slightly. "Do you ever think of running?" she asked. "Truly running?" Roman's gaze hardened with memory. "Every day. But I do not run alone." Her breath caught. "Are you saying?" He shook his head gently. "I am saying that escape without purpose is only another kind of cage." She lowered her voice. And if there was purpose? Roman didn't answer with words. His silence was clearer than any sentence. A thunderless tremor ran through the house. The tapping in the walls ceased. The rain outside quickened. Eliza stepped closer again, her voice barely audible. My father will not let this end quietly. When he loses control, he breaks things. Roman's eyes darkened. Then we do not let him. Her mouth parted slightly, stunned by his certainty. What neither of them knew, what neither sensed in that fragile moment, was that on the other side of Eliza's door, someone stood listening. A shadow. A shape. A man who believed the arrangement had already gone too far. A man whose decision would draw blood within days. By the second week, the whispers had spread beyond the Whitfield estate. News traveled through Virginia like wildfire, faster than horses, faster than sermons, faster than common sense. Even the wealthiest planters who prided themselves on ignoring gossip could not ignore this. Colonel Whitfield, old, stubborn, and proud, had given authority over his only daughter to an enslaved man. It didn't matter that the contract was legal on some obscure technicality. It didn't matter whether the rumors were exaggerated. It didn't even matter what the arrangement truly meant. What mattered was appearances, and the appearance was unforgivable. 3 miles south, in a richly furnished parlor, 5 planters and 1 overseer gathered beneath the golden chandelier of the Mercer estate. Rain pounded the windows. The fire crackled. Whiskey burned in 6 identical glasses. Jonathan Mercer, the host, leaned forward. This cannot stand, he declared. If Whitfield does this, what's next? The man has lost control of his household. A round-bellied planter named Keating slammed his glass down. Control? He handed his daughter to a black man and expects us to nod politely? The man's a disgrace. Another, thin and sharp-eyed, muttered, It's madness. And madness infects. But the most dangerous man in the room was William Barrow. The overseer lent sometimes between estates when violence was needed discreetly. Barrow was not wealthy. He did not belong to their social circle. But he had something the others did not. A willingness to spill blood. Barrow spoke without raising his voice. Colonel Whitfield is creating a precedent. If he allows this, others might follow. Weak men will imitate what stronger men fail to condemn. Mercer exhaled heavily. Eliza Whitfield is a liability. Always has been. But this? Giving her to that blacksmith? Roman, is it? Barrow nodded once. Roman. One of the planters shivered. I've seen him. He's unnatural. Barrow's lip curled. No slave should be that strong. And no daughter should be ordered to obey him. Then what do you propose? Mercer asked. Barrow leaned back, fingers tapping the glass. We speak to Whitfield. Give him a chance to correct the mistake. If he refuses... Keating swallowed. You mean, take the girl? Barrow didn't blink. If necessary. Mercer hesitated. Whitfield has always been a proud man. He is no longer a rational one, Barrow replied. And the county won't protect him if this scandal grows. A long silence followed. Rain lashed harder against the windows. Finally, Mercer said quietly, 6 men. That is enough. We go tomorrow night. Meanwhile, at Whitfield Plantation, the unease thickened like humidity before a storm. The servants avoided conversation. Fitch stopped meeting Roman's eyes. Even the colonel knew he was losing control, though he refused to admit it. He called Eliza to the parlor one evening as lightning flickered across the sky. You will behave in front of visitors, he said sharply. What visitors? She asked. He did not answer directly. Your conduct reflects on this family. She looked at him calmly. What conduct have I shown but obedience? Do not speak to me in riddles, he snapped. You will remain in your room tomorrow night. Eliza's eyes narrowed. Who is coming? He grabbed her wrist, not harshly but firmly enough to send a message. Do not question me. She twisted her wrist free with surprising swiftness. If you do not tell me, I will find out. The colonel's face reddened. You will obey. Eliza's voice lowered into something chilling. Roman does not speak to me like that. The colonel's jaw clenched violently. He is beneath you. Then why did you give me to him? His hand trembled. "Eliza," he said carefully, "do not say that outside this room." "I already did," she said quietly. The colonel froze. "What?" "Fitch overheard yesterday. At the stair landing." The colonel's breath quickened. Fear, not for Eliza but for his own reputation, stabbed through him. "Go to your room," he ordered. "Now." Eliza walked away without another word. But what she did not know, what none of them knew, was that the 6 men had already mounted their horses. That Barrow had sharpened his blade. That Mercer had packed his pistol. That they had left Mercer's estate with lanterns, ropes, and the blind confidence of men who believed righteousness was on their side. Roman sensed it before anyone else. Not the men, not their horses, but the shift in the wind. He stood outside the forge near dusk, wiping sweat from his brow. The fire glowed red behind him. The cicadas had gone silent. The sky was bruised purple. And for the first time since he arrived in the North Wing, he felt a presence he had no name for, a pulse of danger echoing through the air. Eliza appeared on the path, shawl wrapped tightly around her. She approached him quickly. "Roman," she whispered, "something's wrong." He nodded. "Yes." She looked startled that he agreed so easily. "You feel it too?" He stared past her toward the tree line. "I do." "What is it?" He took a breath, answering with the certainty of instinct rather than knowledge. "Men." Eliza shivered, though the evening was still warm. "My father expects visitors tomorrow." Roman shook his head. "Tonight?" Her eyes widened. "How do you know?" Roman didn't know how. He just did. Before she could ask again, Fitch came running from the main house, face pale, sweat dripping down his temples. "Roman!" Fitch shouted, voice cracking. "Inside. Now." The desperation in Fitch's tone was enough to freeze both Roman and Eliza where they stood. "What is it?" Roman demanded. Fitch pointed toward the road leading up the hill, where 6 faint lantern lights flickered in the distance like approaching stars. "They're coming," Fitch rasped. 6 of them. Armed. Eliza's pulse hammered. "For me?" Roman didn't answer, because he already knew. What Roman did not yet know was that this was the first step toward the night that would leave 6 men dead. What he did know, what he felt in his bones, was that tonight someone meant to separate him and Eliza forever. And they would use force to do it. The lanterns moved slowly at first, tiny points of flame weaving through the dark trees like fireflies possessed. Then they multiplied, 2 lights becoming 4, 4 becoming 6, until the shape of mounted men emerged against the moonlit ridge. The horses snorted, uneasy, hooves sinking into the soft mud left by the storm. Inside the house, Colonel Whitfield stood rigid at the parlor window, watching the lights approach. His face shifted through a palette of emotions: indignation, panic, shame, something close to terror. He had expected their anger. He had not expected their arrival. He muttered to himself, "Fools, they wouldn't dare, not here. Not at my door." But they dared. Every man who rode tonight felt justified. Roman reached the main house before Fitch did. He moved fast, Eliza close behind him, her shawl flapping in the wind. She was breathless, but not from running. Fear tightened her chest like a tightening band. "Roman," she whispered, "why would they come at night?" "Because they do not want witnesses," he said. Fitch caught up, panting, pointing toward the approaching riders. "Barrow's leading them. Mercer too. They're saying Whitfield is unfit to guard his own blood." Eliza's voice trembled. "They mean to take me." Roman did not soften his tone. "Yes." She swallowed hard. "My father will stop them." Roman's jaw tightened. "Will he?" Eliza had no answer. By the time the riders reached the front yard, rain began again. Not heavy, but steady, a thin veil of water shimmering in the cold lantern light. The men dismounted, boots splashing in the mud. Barrow took the lead, pistol holstered at his side, coat soaked dark from the drizzle. Mercer's lantern swung from his hand, reflecting sharp in his eyes. Colonel Whitfield stormed onto the front porch before they could knock. "What is the meaning of this?" he barked. "You come to my property after dark? Armed?" Barrow removed his hat slowly, deliberately. "Abner." We gave you days to correct the mistake. The colonel stiffened. There is no mistake. Mercer stepped forward. You gave your daughter to a slave. A legal correction, Whitfield snapped. You know nothing of the situation. We know enough, Barrow said. And tonight we end it. Roman stepped forward from the shadows, placing himself subtly between Eliza and the men. Barrow's eyes flicked to the huge figure and hardened with hatred. There he is, Barrow said. The blacksmith. The one you put above your own blood. Roman did not speak. Eliza stood half-hidden behind him, heart thudding violently in her chest. Get away from her, Mercer demanded. Roman didn't move. He is following orders, the colonel shouted defensively. Mine. Your orders are madness, Barrow growled. We are taking the girl. No, Eliza said, voice shaking. You will not touch me. Barrow ignored her. Step aside, he told Roman. Roman lifted his chin slightly. She stays. Keating, the round-bellied planter, scoffed. Hear that? The slave gives commands. A few of the men laughed, but there was no humor in it. Only cruelty. Barrow advanced a step, rain dripping off his coat. Move aside, Roman. Last warning. Roman's voice was calm. I will not. Barrow's hand went to his pistol. Eliza sucked in a breath. Fitch cursed under his breath. The colonel's complexion turned ghostly, realizing this had escalated beyond all reason. The air thickened. Silence stretched. Then, Eliza whispered, barely audible, Roman, don't. But Barrow had already drawn the pistol. Everything happened at once. Barrow fired. The shot tore through the porch rail, splintering wood inches from Roman's shoulder. Eliza screamed. Roman surged forward, grabbing Barrow's wrist and twisting with brutal precision. The pistol clattered to the mud. Barrow howled. Mercer lunged with a lantern, smashing it against Roman's arm. Flames burst briefly before rain doused them. Keating drew his knife. Another man grabbed Eliza, dragging her toward the wagon. Roman moved like a man forged in iron. He struck the first attacker in the throat, clean, final. The man collapsed, choking on his own breath. Roman spun, blocking the second man's blade with his forearm, blood immediately trailing down his skin. He head-butted him hard enough to break bone. Eliza struggled violently against the arms, forcing her away. Roman, she gasped, voice cracking. Roman charged after her. Two men collided with him, grabbing his arms, trying to hold him back. Roman roared, a deep, guttural sound Eliza had never heard from him, then threw them off with such force that one slammed into the wagon wheel, neck twisting at an unnatural angle. Mercer tried to raise the fallen pistol. Roman kicked it away. Barrow retrieved his knife, eyes wild. Enough, he bellowed. He dies tonight. Roman didn't hesitate. He grabbed Barrow's wrist again, this time not to twist, but to pull him closer. Rain drenched them both. Barrow slashed, blade grazing Roman's ribs. Roman didn't flinch. He pivoted, seized Barrow by the collar, and slammed him against the porch post so hard the wood cracked. The blade fell. Roman caught it. Barrow froze. Roman held the knife, but didn't strike. Eliza's voice cut through the chaos. Roman, don't kill him. Roman's arm trembled with the effort to hold back. Barrow, panting, hissed, do it then. Prove what you are. Roman's grip tightened. But then chaos shifted elsewhere. One of the men dragging Eliza slipped in the mud. She tore free and ran toward Roman. The man grabbed her from behind, pulling her down. Eliza fell hard, screaming as he covered her mouth. Roman saw red. He didn't think. He didn't choose. He reacted. He struck Barrow down with the flat of the blade, sending him sprawling unconscious. Then he charged the man holding Eliza. His fist connected with the attacker's jaw, a brutal, decisive break. The man crumpled. Blood mixed with rain. 3 bodies lay still. 2 crawled away groaning. 1 staggered toward the road. The 6th man, the only one still standing, fled into the night. The violence stopped as suddenly as it began. Rain washed the blood into the earth. Lanterns flickered weakly. Horses screamed in panic. Eliza collapsed into Roman's arms, trembling uncontrollably. Roman held her tightly, breath ragged, heart thunderous. Behind them, the front door creaked open. Colonel Whitfield stood there, ghost-white, staring at the carnage. "What have you done?" he whispered. Roman didn't answer, because he did not know yet that this was only the beginning. By dawn the house would burn, and one of the bodies on the ground would not be dead forever. The rain stopped just before midnight, leaving the world drenched and trembling. Mud pooled across the yard where bodies had fallen. The lanterns flickered weakly, their flames shuddering in the damp wind. The scent of gunpowder still lingered, sharp, metallic, refusing to fade. Eliza clung to Roman, knees weak, breath thin. Her nightgown was streaked with mud and blood, not her own. Roman held her as though grounding her to the earth, his chest rising and falling like a man still half inside battle. Colonel Whitfield stood on the porch steps, staring at the chaos as though he were witnessing someone else's nightmare. His face was slack, his eyes wide, his hands shaking. 6 men, he whispered. 6 respectable men. Only 4 lay still on the ground. 1 crawled away into the dark. 1 had already vanished. "You have doomed us," the colonel rasped. Roman said nothing. Eliza drew back from him, trembling. She looked at her father, and something sharp and final settled inside her. "You brought this upon yourself," she said. The colonel flinched at her voice, not the words but the cold steadiness behind them. "Eliza, Eliza, you will come with me. We will lock the doors. We will tell them you were taken. We will lie," she finished. "We must," the colonel snapped. "If the county learns my daughter was guarded by him," he jabbed a shaking finger toward Roman, "they will drag me from this house." Roman lifted Eliza to her feet. She stepped forward, shoulders squared despite her shaking. "No one dragged you anywhere," she said. "You chose this fate for yourself." The colonel's voice cracked. "I tried to save you." Eliza stared at him with something approaching pity. "You tried to save your name. Not me." A gust of wind swept across the porch, extinguishing one of the lanterns. Darkness rolled in thicker. Somewhere far off, a horse screamed, a wounded sound that faded into silence. Fitch stumbled into the yard then, clutching his side, face pale with terror. Sir, the cabins are in chaos. The field hands, they're moving, they're shouting there." A scream tore through the night from the direction of the slave quarters, raw, furious, unrestrained. "What did you expect?" Eliza whispered. "The overseers ran. Word will spread by sunrise." Fitch grabbed the colonel's arm. "We need orders, sir. If they think the master has lost control." "He has lost control," Eliza said. Roman stepped between them instinctively, his presence steady, immovable. The colonel's fear twisted into rage. "You," he spat at Roman. "You are the cause of all this." Roman's eyes were dark, unreadable. "I defended her. You killed them." Roman's jaw tightened. "They came here to take her. They came here to protect her," the colonel roared. "To save her from your influence." Eliza's voice cracked like a whip. "Father, enough." The colonel froze. Eliza took a single step toward him. "You destroyed this house the moment you put that key in Roman's hand. You set this fire long before tonight." The colonel stared at her, face crumpling into something broken and old. "What have you become?" "The truth," she whispered. A loud crash echoed across the yard. All heads turned. The south barn door swung wide and firelight flickered from within. Smoke billowed upward, thick, fast, alive. Fitch screamed, "Fire! The barn is burning." "No," Eliza breathed. "No, it's too fast. Too big. Someone said it." Roman moved first, scanning the flames. They licked the air in jagged shapes, spreading unnaturally quick. The heat carried the scent of turpentine. This wasn't an accident. Someone had ignited it with purpose. The colonel's voice cracked. "The harvest, the equipment, everything will burn." Roman ignored him. His eyes fixed on the cabins. Screams were rising there now, no longer isolated but collective. Shapes ran between shadows. The enslaved community, sensing opportunity or danger or both, was stirring violently. Chaos had begun. Eliza grabbed Roman's arm. "We have to go. Now." Roman turned to her, torn. "There are people who need help." "You cannot save them all," she whispered. "But you can save me." It was one of the few moments she had ever spoken from pure instinct. Roman looked past her toward the horizon. Another flare of fire rose, this time nearer. Someone had ignited a second structure. Fitch dropped to his knees, sobbing. "It's the end. It's the end of the estate." The colonel staggered backward, gripping the railing. "Get inside," he gasped. "Both of you. We will survive this. We will barricade the doors." His words died in his throat as smoke curled up the porch steps. Not from the barn. Not from the cabins. From the house. Roman spun. Flames flickered behind a window on the west side of the mansion. The curtains glowed orange. Eliza's voice quivered. "Someone set the house too." Roman didn't hesitate. He grabbed her hand. "We leave." The colonel lurched forward, reaching for her. Eliza, you stay with me." She stepped back. For the first time in her life, she looked at him like he was a stranger. "No." The colonel stared at her, stunned, uncomprehending. "I did everything for you." Eliza shook her head. "You did everything for yourself." The flames roared louder. Roman pulled her toward the side yard. She stumbled, then found her footing. Smoke stung their eyes. Sparks rained from the roof like falling stars. The house groaned under the weight of the growing fire, timbers cracking, windows shattering. Behind them, the colonel screamed her name, but the wind and fire swallowed his voice. Roman lifted Eliza in his arms as the porch collapsed behind them, throwing sparks into the night. They ran, through mud, through smoke, through the last remnants of a world that had been dying long before the first match was struck. Eliza buried her face in Roman's shoulder. Not crying. Not fainting. Just holding on. At the edge of the woods, Roman finally stopped. They turned. Whitfield Plantation, house, porch, legacy, was an inferno. Flames writhed into the sky. The night glowed orange. And somewhere inside that burning house, someone still moved. A silhouette. A figure. Someone who had not fallen. Someone who would hunt them before dawn. By dawn, Whitfield Plantation was a skeleton of itself. Smoke clung to the earth like a living thing, thick and wet and heavy. The house had burned through the night, groaning, collapsing, erupting again whenever a new beam caught flame. What remained were blackened pillars, a half-standing chimney, and ash drifting across the charred yard like gray snow. The county riders arrived just after sunrise. 6 men on horseback, sheriff, deputies, and 2 local landowners summoned as witnesses. Their boots hit the wet ground with muffled thuds. Their expressions shifted slowly as they surveyed what once had been the pride of Abner Whitfield. "What happened here?" one whispered. No one answered. The bodies of 4 intruders lay where they had fallen the night before, carefully turned over and checked by shaking hands. Mercer's face had been burned beyond recognition. Barrow's skull was fractured. The others showed signs of blunt force, struggle, panic. The surviving 2 had fled, leaving no trace. A deputy knelt near the porch remains. "Whose boot tracks are these?" "Hard to say," the sheriff muttered. "Too many footprints. Too much mud. Too much fire." But he noticed something else, a heel impression far larger than any of the deputies. Heavy. The mark of a man with extraordinary strength running into the woods. Roman's footprint. He didn't comment. Not yet. Inside the ruins they found one body, or what was left of it. The colonel lay near the collapsed staircase, face buried under wooden debris, one arm outstretched toward the parlor door as if he had died reaching for something, or someone. His skin was blackened, his coat half melted into the floorboards. A deputy lifted his hand, then let it fall. "He didn't make it out," the sheriff said quietly. "Where's the daughter?" a witness asked. Silence tightened around them. They searched the ruins 3 times. They sifted ash, overturned beams, opened half-burned trunks, called her name through the rubble. Nothing. No bones. No traces of clothing. No signs of Eliza Whitfield. One deputy murmured, "She must have burned completely." But another shook his head. "Bodies don't vanish like that." Not even in a fire like this. The sheriff swallowed. Then she ran. Someone took her. Or she fled on her own. Fled. A landowner scoffed. With who? That blacksmith. The sheriff didn't respond. Instead, he turned to the only surviving servant who hadn't fled to the woods. Matthew, the quiet steward. His face was gray with soot, his trembling hands clutching a scorched handkerchief. "Tell us what happened," the sheriff said. Matthew hesitated. I don't know, sir." The sheriff stepped closer. "Tell the truth." Matthew's voice cracked. "I saw the fire start. Not in the barn. In the house. Someone poured liquor, oil, something, on the curtains. I saw a figure run down the hallway. But the smoke was too thick." "A figure?" the sheriff pressed. "Man or woman?" Matthew shut his eyes. "I don't know." "And the girl?" asked the deputy. "Did she escape?" Matthew trembled. I heard her scream once. But after that." The sheriff studied him long enough to decide Matthew had reached the limit of what he would say, or what he dared to say. By mid-morning, the investigation shifted from searching to documenting. Papers were soaked. Ledgers destroyed. Contracts half-burned. One deputy found a set of keys melted into a lump in the hallway, 3 keys fused into one. Another discovered something worse. The remains of an unsigned document, the top edge still legible. Complete authority over Miss Eliza Whitfield. A heavy silence fell across the room. "What was he planning?" someone murmured. No one answered. By noon, rumors had already traveled beyond the estate. Some said Eliza had died screaming. Others swore she ran into the woods with the blacksmith who murdered the men. A few whispered something stranger, that she had walked into the fire willingly, her face calm, her eyes open. The sheriff refused to entertain superstition. He wrote a single line in his report. Eliza Whitfield, missing. He did not list her as dead. 3 days later, a search party combed the surrounding woods. They found footprints, one set small, one impossibly large, leading toward the river. The tracks vanished at the waterline. "Did they drown?" a deputy asked. "Or cross," the sheriff replied. He looked downstream toward the distant curve of the river that wound toward Tennessee. He did not say it aloud, but he felt it in the hollow of his chest. "They're alive." Within a week, the Whitfield estate was sold quietly, too quietly. The new owner bulldozed what remained, rebuilt on top of the ashes, and sealed the truth behind polite silence. The county records were altered. The contract was destroyed. Eliza's name was erased from public discussion. The newspapers printed a sanitized version. House fire claims plantation owner, daughter believed lost. But among whispering servants, shaken riders, and frightened planters, a different story circulated. A more dangerous one. They spoke of a pale woman running through the woods with a giant beside her. They spoke of the blacksmith who fought 6 armed men and lived. They spoke of the girl who had suffered whispers her whole life, and finally chose her own voice. And in those whispers lived the most frightening rumor of all. That someone survived the fire. Someone who wasn't supposed to. Someone who would not stop searching. 4 years afterward, the ruins of Whitfield Plantation whispered. Not literally, not in the way Eliza once heard the tapping in the walls, but in the way destroyed places whisper through memory. Travelers swore the ashes never fully settled, that a faint gray dust clung to the soil no matter how often storms washed the land. Locals avoided the place. They said ghosts lingered there. But the true ghosts were made of flesh, not smoke. The first rumor emerged 6 months after the fire. A tradesman passing through a mountain town near the Tennessee border claimed he had seen a tall black man hammering iron at a small roadside forge. Taller than any man he'd encountered. Stronger too. The tradesman described the blacksmith's arms, corded muscle, familiar scars, and a woman sitting just outside the forge, pale and still, wrapped in a shawl despite the warm spring afternoon. She barely spoke, he said, but she watched everything, like she was learning the world again. Most dismissed the story as coincidence. A tall blacksmith and a pale woman could be anyone, but the rumor refused to die. Within a year, a second sighting surfaced. this time from a traveling preacher who claimed he met a couple seeking blessing for their unborn child. The preacher remembered the woman's odd stillness, the way she touched her stomach as though unsure the life inside her truly existed. And he remembered the man beside her, standing protectively, refusing to let anyone step too close. I asked their names, the preacher recounted. The man said Roman. The woman, she said Eliza. That story spread faster than wildfire. People scoffed. Others whispered with fascination. Some grew afraid. If she survived the fire, one planter muttered at a summer gathering, why didn't she return home? Because home had burned long before the flames touched the wood. Years passed. The country moved toward its own fire. A war split across states, families, and ideologies. Most stories of Whitfield Plantation were swallowed by the louder tragedies of the era. But a few people never forgot. A young historian, decades later, uncovered a sealed box in a county archive, charred around the edges, metal hinges rusted through. Inside lay fragments of documents that escaped complete destruction. Pieces of a contract. Melted keys. A half-burned letter written in a woman's hand. Only one line was still legible. He is the only one who sees me. The historian felt something twist in his chest, an ache born of truth and tragedy. He tried to reconstruct the document, pressing each brittle piece of paper against the table, reading the scraps through a magnifying glass. He found enough to understand the scandal. Complete authority, 90 days, obedience, correction, discipline. He found the date. He found the signatures. And he found the single scrawl of Roman's name. What happened here? He murmured. His colleague shrugged. A fire. A missing girl. A violent slave. Nothing more. But the historian knew better. He traveled to Tennessee following the old rumors. He questioned innkeepers, blacksmith apprentices, elderly mountain families who remembered whispers their grandmothers once told. Only one story held consistency. A pale woman with dark hair. A towering blacksmith with haunted eyes. A child born with fists strong enough to dent metal before he turned 5. A boy who grew silent whenever asked where his parents came from. The historian found nothing concrete. No grave, no record, no census entry. Only story layered upon story. Still, one detail emerged more than once. In a remote Tennessee village, long after the war, people spoke of a man who built iron fences that never rusted, horseshoes that never bent, tools that never broke. They spoke of his wife, quiet, observant, a woman who sometimes woke screaming but calmed only when her husband held her hand. The villagers claimed she died young. No cause given, but sorrow lingered in her husband's eyes long after she was buried beneath a maple tree. The blacksmith vanished soon after. Some said he walked into the mountains carrying nothing but a hammer. Some said he left with a grown son heading west. Some said he was taken in the night by men wearing deputy stars. But most believed the simplest truth. Roman had spent his life protecting Eliza Whitfield. And once she was gone, the world held nothing left worth fighting for. The historian closed his notebook, staring at the final line he had written. They survived the fire, only to be consumed by a different kind of flame. He thought of the contract, the scandal, the bloodshed, the whispers. He thought of the girl who was called Unmarriageable and the man who was called Property. Two souls pushed together by cruelty, surviving because they chose each other when no one else did. And then he thought of the last rumor, the one villagers rarely spoke above a whisper. That sometimes, late at night, people heard the distant ring of a hammer echoing across the hills. Slow, steady, unmistakable. A rhythm like a heartbeat. A reminder that some stories never truly die. What do you think really happened to Eliza Whitfield and Roman? Did they build a life in the mountains, hidden from a world that would never have allowed their existence? Or did the fire that consumed Whitfield Plantation simply follow them into the wilderness until there was nothing left to save? Some say their son grew up to be a man with hands strong enough to bend iron, carrying both his father's silence and his mother's haunted eyes. Others believe Roman wandered alone after Eliza's death, the weight of his choices echoing louder than any hammer he ever swung. But there is a deeper question here, one only you can answer. Was Eliza saved, or was she simply freed long enough to choose her own ending? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one. And if you want more dark historical mysteries like this, stories that blur the line between truth and legend, stories that expose the forgotten, the silenced, and the buried, make sure you subscribe to the Slave Rebellion. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new tale. Share this video with someone who loves history told with fire, fear, and truth. These stories need to be remembered. These voices need to be heard. I'll see you in the next video.